It was a warm Saturday morning when I finally decided to take the leap. For months, I had been on edge, navigating the suffocating rules and petty disputes of my homeowners association. The HOA seemed less about community and more about control. I had endured endless complaints about my landscaping choices, my mailbox design, and even the way I hung my holiday decorations. Each week brought a new note, each more absurd than the last. Today, I was done. Today, I was leaving the HOA. I had carefully read through all the bylaws, prepared the necessary forms, and double-checked that there would be no financial penalties for resigning. I took a deep breath, filled out the paperwork, and slipped it into the HOA office mailbox. My hands shook, not with fear, but with excitement. The sense of freedom was intoxicating. Of course, not everyone shared my enthusiasm. Karen Thompson, the HOA president, had a reputation in the neighborhood for being difficult. To put it mildly, she was the type who would enforce a ban on garden gnomes if they were not in compliance. I had seen her in action more than once, wielding the rules like a weapon. The thought of her reaction made me smirk. Sure enough, within an hour, a knock echoed on my door. I opened it to see Karen standing there, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You can't just leave the HOA," she barked. "This is unprecedented. I'm calling the police." I blinked. The audacity left me momentarily speechless. "You're calling the police over me resigning from the HOA?" "Yes, this is outrageous," she sputtered, waving her arms like a conductor orchestrating a storm. I leaned against the doorframe, trying not to laugh. "Karen, you do realize resigning from an HOA isn't illegal, right?" Her lips tightened. "I don't care. I'm doing it anyway." She stormed down the sidewalk, heading toward her car. A few minutes later, the distant wail of a siren grew closer. My pulse quickened, not out of fear, but curiosity. Who did she think she was calling? As the patrol car rolled to a stop in front of my house, Karen practically danced on the sidewalk, ready to report her grievance. I opened the door to greet the officer, and time seemed to freeze. The man stepping out of the car wore the unmistakable look of authority, but also familiarity. Then it hit me. The uniformed officer was my son, Michael, my 24-year-old son who had joined the police force last year. Karen froze mid-step, her face paling as her eyes darted from me to Michael. "Wait, he can't," she stammered, her voice barely audible. Michael, equally stunned but keeping his composure, tipped his hat slightly. "Morning, Mom. How's it going?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I couldn't help but laugh. This was going to be interesting. Karen's face was a study in disbelief. She stared at Michael as if he were some kind of trick, some illusion conjured to humiliate her. Her grip on her phone tightened, and I could see her fingers twitching, hovering over the call button like a live wire. Michael, for his part, remained calm. His uniform was crisp, his demeanor professional, but the faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips betrayed his amusement. "Ma'am," he said politely, "how can I help you today?" Karen's voice came out in a high-pitched squeak. He can't be, this isn't, you're not supposed to." She waved her hands, struggling to form a coherent sentence. "I called because this resident is, leaving the HOA illegally." I leaned back in the doorway, trying to hide my laughter. "Karen, leaving an HOA is not illegal. I just filled out the paperwork this morning." Michael raised an eyebrow. "I'll need to see what the complaint is about," he said, keeping his tone professional but gentle. He glanced at me. "Mind if we go over it?" Karen's eyes widened in horror. You're not going to, he's... Her words faltered. The more she tried to protest, the more ridiculous she sounded. I gestured toward the living room. "Let's sit down. It'll be easier than yelling across the yard." Karen reluctantly followed, muttering under her breath. I sat down on the couch, Michael across from me, and Keran perched stiffly in the armchair, still fuming. Michael held a small notebook in his hands, flipping it open as if preparing to take notes. "So tell me exactly what happened," Michael said calmly, directing his question to Keran. She is leaving the HOA without my permission. She... Karen's voice cracked as she realized Michael wasn't taking the bait. "She can't just do that. The rules... They... Michael leaned back slightly. "I'm sorry, Keran, but there are no laws being broken here. Leaving an HOA is a civil matter, not criminal. I can't take any action in this case. It's not illegal." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. She opened her mouth again, ready to argue, but nothing came out. Her mind was racing, trying to comprehend that the very person she had hoped would enforce her authority, the police officer, was the son of the person she was trying to intimidate. I couldn't resist. "Looks like you might have overstepped a bit, Keran." Michael gave me a side glance, silently conveying, "You were right to find this funny." Keran fumbled with her phone, muttering about complaints, rules, and injustices, but the momentum had shifted. Her power had evaporated, replaced by awkwardness and embarrassment. The tables had turned, and it was clear she hadn't expected this kind of showdown. The room filled with a tense silence, broken only by Keran's huffing and the faint scribble of Michael taking notes that were completely unnecessary. I sat back, savoring the moment, realizing that the real satisfaction wasn't just in leaving the HOA. It was in watching Keran's overconfidence collapse in the face of reality. Keran's eyes darted around the living room, like a predator realizing the hunt had turned on her. She clutched her phone, shaking it slightly as if it were a lifeline. I could see the gears turning in her mind. She wasn't used to losing, and losing to me with my own son standing there in uniform was unthinkable. I think you're supposed to follow some procedure," she finally sputtered, pointing at Michael. "Don't you have to take action? This is... Michael tilted his head, calm as ever. "Ma'am, like I said, there's no criminal activity here. Resigning from an HOA doesn't violate any laws. There's nothing for me to enforce." Keran's jaw dropped. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She tried to rally. But the bylaws! She can't just leave! There's paperwork!" I held back a laugh. "Keran, I submitted the paperwork. Everything's in order. If anything, you're just overreacting." Keran's hands flew to her temples. "Overreacting? How dare you! I am the president! This is my community! You can't just... She froze mid-rant, realizing she was rambling to the very people she was trying to intimidate. Michael leaned forward slightly, his tone still patient but firm. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down. I can't do anything here. And honestly, continuing this argument won't help you." Keran's eyes flicked from Michael to me, her confidence draining with every second. I couldn't resist a little jab. "It seems the rules don't apply the way you think they do, Keran." Her mouth opened again, but this time no words came out. Instead, she let out a long, exasperated sigh, slumping slightly in her chair. The fight had left her, replaced by disbelief and embarrassment. I could practically hear her thoughts screaming, "I didn't see this coming." Then, as if to punctuate the moment, Michael set his notebook down and stood. "I'm going to file a report that no crime occurred," he said lightly, his tone almost teasing. "That's my official action." Keran blinked at him, incredulous. A report that... nothing?" "Yes," Michael said, straightening his uniform. "Sometimes documenting nothing is just as important as documenting something." Keran's mouth opened and closed again. Her phone slipped from her fingers and thudded against the carpet. She looked like she'd been deflated. The aura of authority she'd carried around the neighborhood for years had evaporated in an instant. I stood as well, walking toward the door with the calm satisfaction of someone who had finally outmaneuvered a tyrant. "Well, Keran," I said, "I guess today is a good day to learn that some battles just aren't worth fighting." Keran didn't respond. She simply stared at us, speechless and humiliated. Michael gave me a small nod, and together we watched as the HOA Queen's kingdom of rules and complaints crumbled in silence. For the first time in years, I felt completely free, and knowing that my son had my back made it all the sweeter. Keran didn't speak for a long moment, her face still pale and frozen in disbelief. The silence in the room was almost deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the distant chirp of birds outside. Finally, she muttered, I can't believe this. You can believe it, Keran, I said calmly, crossing my arms. Leaving an HOA is legal. Complaining to the police doesn't change that. Your little scheme has backfired. Michael, standing beside me, gave her a polite but firm nod. I'd suggest you review the bylaws carefully and remember, authority only works when it's based on reality. You're confusing rules with the law. Keran's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. I need to report this properly. Michael raised a brow. Ma'am, there's nothing to report. I've already documented that no crime occurred. Filing more reports won't change anything. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked genuinely small. Gone was the confident, domineering HOA president. In her place was a woman realizing she had overstepped, miscalculated, and, quite publicly, failed. I walked toward the door, feeling lighter than I had in years. You know, I said, smiling lightly, I'm going to miss this place, but I won't miss, well, certain people. I gave Keran a pointed glance. Keran opened her mouth, then closed it again. No words came. She finally turned and left without another protest, phone clutched tightly to her chest, the echo of her footsteps fading down the hall. Michael shook his head, grinning slightly. She really thought she could intimidate you. Didn't expect me to show up, did she? I laughed, a full, unrestrained laugh. Not in a million years? Honestly, I think seeing her speechless might be the best part of this entire ordeal. He laughed with me, then got serious. You did the right thing by following the process. You stayed calm, handled everything legally, and now she has no leverage. I nodded, feeling a surge of pride, not just in myself, but in Michael. My son, standing there in his uniform, had turned an absurd confrontation into a complete win. There was no yelling, no fighting, no chaos, just the quiet power of authority used correctly. As the day faded into afternoon, I looked around my home and realized something else. Freedom wasn't just leaving the HOA. It was taking control of your life, standing your ground, and knowing that you weren't alone. With my son by my side, even if accidentally, I felt unstoppable. And somewhere down the street, Keran Thompson was still replaying the scene in her mind, realizing that her reign of petty authority had ended not with a confrontation, but with quiet, undeniable proof that the law, and a little family teamwork, was on my side. I smiled, poured myself a cup of tea, and finally breathed. Freedom never tasted so sweet. Enjoying this wild HOA showdown? Hit that subscribe button to catch more crazy real-life stories. Give this a like if you were shocked by Keran's reaction, and drop a comment below. What would you do if your HOA president tried calling the cops on you?